welcome back. So, we've been getting a bunch of new skills recently, or at least as far as I could tell, every single banner, or every, other banner that's at least new, we've been getting some new type of skill. And it just made me wonder how many old skills that we probably had from, the launch days, or maybe, by the end of Book 1, are still viable even to this day. So I kind of want to go over a list of skills that, after looking through a fair amount of them, and from what I could tell, most of these were at least at launch or somewhere between launch and Book 1, that I thought we could at least talk about, because surprisingly there's a fair amount of skills that even to this day still work relatively well. Albeit there are definitely more premium, much better options available, but even the ones that are readily available, or the ones that came out of Book 1, still do quite well. And for that, I just want to give general synopsis, retrospect, thingy, whatever. I don't really know what to call it, but I just want to talk about skills that were pretty much from the launch days up till the end of Book 1, and just give my thoughts on skills that still hold up even to this day. So, with that being said, we may as well just start covering the A passives, and then as we progress, we'll go down to the B passives and the C passives. We'll mainly just be taking a look at the three main passive slots, just A, B, C. Basically just a nice short compact video. So yeah, we may as well just get started by talking about the A passives. After going through the list of A passives that we have in the game currently, and picking out all the ones that we got anywhere between launch and the end of Book 1, there are only 3 skills from the A slot that I still think held up really, really well. There is one that I'm going to give an honorable mention to, but in terms of just really nice A slots that we still have readily available, I believe out of all the ones that we got at launch, Fury, Life and Death, and Savalan's Shield still hold up quite well even to this day. Fury basically just grants visible stats and inflicts chip damage at the end of every combat. Fury 1, +1 attack speed, defense res, and 2 chip damage after every combat. And as each Fury goes up and up and up, it progressively doubles. So Fury 2, 4 chip damage, +2 to everything. Fury 3, 6, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. Fury's always been that really nice budget skill that you could just snag from a Hinata, and it works in a lot of scenarios, not even just PvE. If you were to use this in Aether Raids, for example, you could just use this for Wings of Mercy beacon chaining, which is really, really good, especially if you're looking to make your Wings of Mercy beacon fall below 50% HP at a consistent rate with or without the likes of Winter Bernadetta. Although Winter Bernadetta does help with that, Fury does also supplement that issue as well, as you'll be reducing the amount of HP you'll get after every single combat. So with that being the case, Fury does still hold up pretty well, regardless of where you use it. You could still use it PvE, you could do the whole Fury Desperation chaining thing with Wings of Mercy Dancers, which is still pretty convenient, but then you could also use it in competitive modes such as Aether Raids, and basically act as Wings of Mercy Beacon, which is really nice. You also have Life and Death, which is mainly going to serve 2 purposes. You're either going to be using it for AoE spamming, maybe with Blazing Wind, Blazing Thunder, whatever the case may be, or you're going to be using it to soak debuffs for attack and speed. You will need visible stats for AoEs to go off way more successfully, and that's why Life and Death tends to be the go-to skill. You could also use Fury with this, so you could also chain it with the likes of Wings of Mercy, but nevertheless, Life and Death does give the biggest stat swing at 5 attack, as opposed to even the highest of Fury, which gives 4 attack. For that reason, Life and Death tends to be one of those really, really nice skills that you just need for your AoE spammer, as you could easily whittle down a lot of units, even far saves, if they don't have any sort of damage reduction properties against AoEs, which most don't. And for that reason, it's still a really nice skill to have just for AoE spamming. But then you also have the fact that, again, you can soak attack and speed with it. So if you need something like that for Bright Shrine soaking in Aether Raids, that's not a bad thing whatsoever. And then, of course, with the rise of save meta and it being as prevalent as ever, we have also the rise of a bunch of units that have armor effectiveness. So naturally, if you could patch out that weakness and just bolster your bulk that way without having to worry with the likes of Brave Erica or Duo Chrom, then you're going to be much more successful in the long run, both as a near and far save. So when I say Savalan's Shield has definitely aged a lot better nowadays than it has in the past, I mean it. You definitely need the right PRF and stat line so you can actually make use of Savalan's Shield without giving up too many matchups. But for specific units, maybe like Arden or any of the Dragon armors that don't already have armor effective nullification in their weapon, they can actually use this quite well because they already have really good bulk as is, and they can basically shrug off a lot of problems as a result of nullifying their armor weakness. so their damage output and survivability is a lot more consistent. So Arden, Fallen Rhea, you name it, anybody who doesn't already have armor effective nullification in their weapon or anywhere in their kit would absolutely appreciate it, especially if they can't afford the run it. And outside of that, there is one honorable mention I would like to give, and that's to Triangle Adept. Triangle Adept has never always been that like super coveted skill to have. In fact, for a while it was always memed on. But for me, I always find that if you're looking just to check specific units, then it's not really bad, especially if you were to combine it with a specific B slot, which we'll get to in a second. It can actually be quite nice, especially on budget if you don't have anything readily available to you. But that's as far as the A passives go. Next we get to the B passives, and one of the better combinations you could absolutely run with Triangle Adept is Lancebreaker. And this is mainly going to be for Brave Hector checks. That's literally all it's going to be for. Because Brave Hector is still one of those really annoying coveted lance armors that you're going to see everywhere because his refine is beyond ridiculous. So the combination of Triangle Adept and Lancebreaker could always be really nice just for checking Brave Hector. Lancebreaker outside of the likes of Aether Rates may not see as much use, but comparatively to a lot of other skills, I do see it a lot more from time to time, especially since Brave Hector is still everywhere. Even though there are more counterparts to him, like Ascended Dune, he's still a coveted threat that a lot of people built up, and for that reason, I still do think that, for what it's worth, Lancebreaker does have a good amount of value in it. You also have your sweep skills in Wind Sweep and Water Sweep. Wind Sweep could always be nice just for securing doubles without the fear of retaliation. If your bulk is really low and you're looking just to get damage out without any sort of risk factor tied to it, then it's not bad. It definitely fell off a bit for ranged threats, mainly because of the advent rise of Ascended Fjorm, who has null counter disrupt built into her weapon, so it definitely lost a bit more value there, but it could still be nice to have nonetheless. And especially given how common null follow-up effects are, I do think that Wind Sweep and Water Sweep still do have quite a bit of value even to this day. You could also make the argument that Water Sweep does have a lot more value than Wind Sweep right now, because now we have the distant counter seal for dragons, so there's a good chance we're going to be seeing a lot more distant counter dragons. And honestly, Water Sweep is never really the worst skill, especially if you are looking to counter basically anything that targets your res, as if you do have a good defense set, then there's a good chance you could always just tank a physical hit as is. And for that reason, I do think that Water Sweep is also worth putting up here alongside Wind Sweep. And outside of that, you have everyone's favorite beast skill, Wings of Mercy. It's very self-explanatory. You give it to any dancer, you give it to any unit for Wings of Mercy chaining, for Aether Raids, on a Gale Force team, or whatever the case may be. It is such a useful skill that I don't see ever losing value, unless they were to just shove Gatekeeper warp effects down everyone's throats. This skill is still really good. And outside of that, we have two honorable mentions I want to bring up, and that's Quick Riposte and Vantage. Quick Riposte has definitely seen better days, especially now that we have Coral Saber and Seahorse Axe for swords and axes respectively. For what it's worth, a lot of slower units that have to function in the enemy phase still depend on this skill. Whether they put it in the B slot or their Sacred Seal, it's still one of those noteworthy skills that's still required for a good amount of slower units, which is why I put it up here. And Advantage, I would say, is definitely risen in value a bit more, simply because a lot of ranged threats and threats in general are ditching the likes of Hardy Baron because they need to pierce through saves. As saves just have a ridiculous amount of bulk, they need to prioritize as much attack as possible. Thus, they're losing out on the likes of Hardy Baron. But that being said, I find that Vantage only really works on units that either have the ability to Vantage at really high HP thresholds, maybe like 100% like Brave Marth or the recently released Brave Byleth, or if they have the ability to attack twice in the enemy phase, as their damage output will be significantly higher in general, which is why I do think it's also worth mentioning Vantage. And that's about it for the B passives. The C passives don't really have much in my opinion, but for what it's worth, I did find two notable skills, or one skill and then one notable skill tree worth mentioning because of the rise of saves and all the like. Although not related to the rise of saves and all that, we have Savage Blow, which can still be really good for Gale Force compositions where the idea is that you're swooping in with a bunch of teammates and you're aiming for one-shots. Savage Blow will absolutely be able to secure that on a bigger basis, but also it can be nice for just chipping down foes in general, especially if you were to pair this with maybe Pain Plus or Serpentine Staff or whatever the case may be. I do think it has still quite a bit of value. And outside of that, we have Spurs. To me, Spurs have aged a lot better ever since we got into the save meta, mainly because now you can group up allies without the worry of anyone getting sniped, mainly for the melee specialists and save escape balls. Ranged specialists will still have to be solo because they can't protect their back allies. But even so, I find that because units are able to be grouped up together a lot more frequently, spurs and spur-like effects have definitely risen in value as a result, which is why I put them up here. And beyond that, I didn't really find a lot of other skills worth mentioning. Maybe I missed some, but if it were anywhere between the launch of FEH and the end of Book 1, then you'll have to let me know what I missed. Because I scrolled through so many skills, I could have easily missed a couple. But even then, I found that these were the most standout options that we got from basically the first year of FEH, give or take a bit less, because Book 1 lasted from beginning of February to, I guess, the end of October or September, whenever the Farfetch'd came out. But it wasn't a whole year, is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, you'll have to let me know what you think down below. Are there any other skill trees that you really like using? Any worth mentioning or bringing up that I didn't bring up? Let me know down below. And until next time, I'll see you later.